If you have been frequenting the religious shops, you will certainly find a replica of the pectoral cross that Pope Francis wears as Pope, that is, as Bishop of Rome, as the Roman Pontiff of the Roman Catholic Church. And you by now know that it has a very unique design. It has on it the image of Jesus as the Good Shepherd, carrying one of the little lamb around his neck, his back area. The origin of this pectoral cross, we are also told, comes directly from the time of Pope Paul VI, who wore this originally when he was named Pope. And Pope Francis, out of reverence to the blessed memory of Blessed Paul VI, opted to wear the same pectoral cross on his breast now. And the reason why Pope Paul VI or Blessed Paul VI chose this design was because, according to a story, although I haven't had a chance to verify its accuracy, but according to the story, on the eve of the Second Vatican Council, Pope Paul VI, who was then bishop, with other several bishops, went on a pilgrimage to the catacombs in Rome. And in the catacombs, you have this pronounced image etched on the walls of the catacombs, this crude picture of Jesus, the Good Shepherd, in a manner that is exactly portrayed in the pectoral cross of Paul VI. It is said that Paul VI borrowed that image right from the catacombs at the time. And the reason why it is so special, because he and his fellow bishops made a solemn promise that on the eve of the Second Vatican Council, when great changes about to take place in the Church, they certainly committed themselves to the task of seeking after the lost sheep, of going out to the periphery to bring to the heart of the Church those who are estranged from it, or those who are distant from it for one reason or another. And special emphasis, of course, is given to those in special situations, both spiritual and material. And so Pope Francis, as you know, wore this pectoral cross now upon his election, because in his pontificate he is committed to the ministry of mercy in the Church, to bring out the image of Jesus as the merciful God, as the face of mercy itself. And he has initiated programs that are out to reach out to those in need, both spiritually and materially. And he is perhaps best remembered today as one of the most compassionate Pope who speaks on behalf of the many voiceless souls that are outside the center of our ecclesial communities and even of civil societies. I speak of this because the original intentions of the first Christians who etched this on the walls of the graves where the Christians were buried, where their loved ones were buried during this time, including perhaps some of the early martyrs who were kept in these catacombs, was this strong belief that Jesus was the realization, or is the realization, of the prophecy of the prophet Ezekiel, whose prophecy is read today in the first reading for the ordinary form of the Mass, meaning the Mass that is more commonly celebrated in our parishes. In the first reading of today from the ordinary form of the Mass, we hear of the prophet Ezekiel saying that God himself has made a vow that the time will come when he will no longer rely on third parties to act on his behalf in the care of his people, that he will directly intervene in the lives of his people like a shepherd, taking care of his flock, protecting them from harm, and keeping them away from harm's way. And that is why, because of the prophet Ezekiel, the first Christians recognized in Jesus the fulfillment of his prophecy and honored him with the title of the Good Shepherd, because Jesus himself speaks of that of himself in the scriptures, I think from the Gospel of St. John. And therefore this image is very moving because it shows a young shepherd strong enough to carry the weakest member of the flock around his neck. because it is wounded, because it is in pain. And he is doing this so that there shall be one fold under one shepherd. The Christians saw in this more than just care for their needs, earthly that is. They also realized that this image speaks to them powerfully at the time of death. That when death happens to a loved one, or when death comes to the person himself, there is great fear, anxiety of not knowing what will transpire in the journey between this life and the next. And so in the insecurity that threatens the inner peace of the soul that is about to depart from this world, this image of a good shepherd, of the good shepherd, is truly comforting. Jesus will make sure that in this journey towards the next life, he will himself carry the sheep, that is the dead, around his neck, to bring it to greener pastures, where there will be peace, where there will be everlasting waters, there will be abundance of life, or there will be life to its fullness. So the Christians comforted themselves that death is not to be feared, because the Good Shepherd comes to carry them personally on this journey towards the next life, to bring them to safe shores, to bring them to their heavenly homeland, to bring them to the loving embrace of God, who will be with them forever. And therefore, it is one of the most compassionate understanding we ever have of Jesus Christ in our theology and in our devotions in the church. I speak today of Christ because today, as you know, in the ordinary form of the Mass, the Church celebrates this final Sunday as the Sunday of Christ the King. And this Christ the King is our Shepherd King, the Good Shepherd King. In the extraordinary rite, we had the joy of celebrating it a few weeks earlier during the last and final Sunday of October, because in the old days, the feast was celebrated just before the feast of All Saints' Day and All Souls' Day. But in the reforms of the liturgy for the ordinary rite, we have this on this new time slot, so to speak. In the extraordinary rite, which is the rite we are celebrating today here in this chapel, we have, instead of the feast of Christ or the solemnity of Christ the King, the celebration of the 24th Sunday after Pentecost. It's a very special Sunday because it is otherwise called as the last Sunday of the year. Because ordinarily there are 24 Sundays after Pentecost, although in reality it can extend to as many as 28. Depending on the schedule of Easter for the following year, adjustments are made. And so if there is a gap between the weeks just before the 24th Sunday, the Mass, rather before the last Sunday of just before Advent, the Mass on the 24th Sunday is moved to another time, maybe on the 25th, or the 26th, or the 27th, but it's celebrated still as the 24th Sunday and the last Sunday of the year. And in the intervening weeks, you have the liturgy borrowed from the weeks of Epiphany, which are not celebrated because normally the weeks between Epiphany and the next season are short, and so there is an excess of liturgical material, so to speak, and these are all transferred during this time. But other than just convenience, there is also something beautiful why we have the readings from the Sundays of Epiphany just before the last Sunday of the year. This is quite strange for us if we grew up under the ordinary rite, because when we go back to Epiphany, we're still moving towards Advent, and now we're already celebrating the season after the visitation of the Three Kings. It's quite confusing if you are not particularly sensitive about the reckoning of time in the liturgy. However, there is a reason, according to Dom Prosper Gueranger, why we read the Sundays of Epiphany just before the last Sunday in this situation like we have this year. Because originally, the last Sunday of the year was not meant to frighten us about the end of the world. It was not meant to give us a prophecy of how the planets will collide with each other. It was not to threaten us with a final judgment where we have to come face to face with Christ and render an account of our deeds, which is what the Gospel reading for the ordinary rite is saying today. The scene of Judgment Day where the King will sit and will divide his people on his left and on his right, the goats and the sheep. The original intention of the last Sunday of the year was one of joyful expectation of that final union that we will experience with Christ. It's almost like the image of the catacombs regarding Christ, of Jesus carrying us on our final days when we leave this world on His back to bring us to heaven. This carrying of all of us on Him, on His person, celebrates the most intimate contact we can ever have with Christ. It is the communion of communions. It is the sweetest moment that we can ever hope to experience from Christ Himself, when He will carry us on His person to bring us to His heavenly homeland, our heavenly homeland. And so the last Sunday was initially intended by the church to be a day where we look forward to our final union with Christ. Later, and so normally before also during this time, the readings about the colliding of the planets, similar to the readings of St. Matthew's Gospel today, which is quite long and it's quite detailed about what will take place on the final day. In fact, that is the reason why Matthew is chosen to be the text of this year for his detailed rendition of what to expect on the final day. These readings were normally before read during the season of Advent, when the church was looking forward to the second coming in view of Christmas, which is the first coming. Not on the last Sunday where we close the year and look forward to the new one come the next Sunday, the first Sunday of Advent. But now, of course, although we still speak of the second coming in the Advent season, greater emphasis about the second coming and the end of the world and all this are placed on this final Sunday. That even the readings of the extraordinary rite joins the themes of the ordinary form of the Mass in reminding us of the end of times and the beginning of our new life in heaven with God. What does this therefore suggest to us as a program of spirituality? We are looking forward to Advent, which happens a few days from now. It's already next Sunday. It's practically around the corner. And we need to max on Advent before we even join the secular world in already anticipating Christmas. Before we can have a Christmas, we must take seriously the Advent season, and we need to be warned this early, not to rush into Christmas with all its joys and festivities without the spirituality of Advent to prepare us for a truly joyful Christmas celebration. These readings on the last Sunday prepares us in the sense that it reminds us that if the goal of life is union with Christ, then there are three things we need to work on just before Christmas. One is to make Him King of our hearts, to allow the law of love and the rule of love to take over our natural tendency to be selfish, to be angry and unforgiving and demanding of others instead of being serving of others, to conquer that side of us with the rule of love and the law of love, which is the only law and rule in the kingdom of God. And in order for us to grow in charity, we need to frequent the Mass, because the Eucharist is the food of charity. It is the vinculum caritatis, the chain of love in the church. It binds us in love, and therefore the more we have of it, the greater the chance to grow in love. We become what we partake of, Christ Himself. Secondly, in this program, meaning for the Advent season, as inspired by today's celebration, we also need to be more, to listen more attentively, and to be more obedient towards what the Church says about certain matters that are important to us, such things as marriage, such things as issues about life, and so on and so forth. Oftentimes now, the opposition towards the Church, which is, by the way, the kingdom of God on earth, is done no longer by direct persecution, although it happens still in several places in the world, but the common way of persecuting the Church is making it appear that the Church has become irrelevant insofar as important concerns or issues are of a concern. That the Church is outmoded in its thinking. It has become an artifact of medieval times, and therefore it no longer speaks at all to anybody who lives in the modern society or contemporary world. To this effect, also we can contribute to the strength of the voice of the church in terms of the promotion of values, of Christian values, in our own adherence to the spirituality of the church. And again, I'd like to encourage everyone to especially pay greater attention and love on our participation of the Eucharist. Maybe it's in the manner of genuflecting properly when we cross the aisle, or making the sign of the cross properly, or dressing rightly for liturgy, or preparing ourselves well for the reception of communion, or maintaining the praying hands gesture if we are already comfortable with it. These little things add up to the promotion of the church and what it represents in our society today, both in our values and in a manner of praying, because as we said last Sunday, how we pray is according to how we believe and is according to how we live. Remember, lex orandi, lex credendi, and lex vivendi. The third and final admonition for us in preparation for the season of Advent is to remember also the afterlife. In November, we have an opportunity to think a lot about it because we are praying constantly for the souls in purgatory, but also the goal of the kingdom is a call to be with God forever in the next life. And therefore, to help us prepare for that, we need to let go of certain attachments that have become very demanding of our attention, time, and resources in this life. This letting go of our attachment to this passing world will mean less time for social networks, less obsession with TV, less obsession with, fashion or whatever shopping habits we may have had developed over time, etc., etc. Little gestures of which we are able to say that this does not define me, this is not my final reality, I'm moving towards heaven soon. And so let us prepare for a good Advent, and let us use this final Sunday to look forward to the time of being with God, not only in this life, but with Him forever in heaven. Amen.